Number 5. Morgellons. Imagine suddenly feeling like 1,000 bugs were crawling underneath your skin, biting you, stinging you, causing nasty weeping sores to erupt all over your body. You might recognize these as the symptoms of dating Colin Farrell. But this is also what people suffering from Morgellons have to endure, or so they say. Morgellons disease reportedly also causes memory loss, joint pain, and fatigue, as well as strange fibrous growths that seem to burst out of the skin in red, white, and blue. So whatever it is, at least the disease is patriotic. Sadly, for most sufferers, the medical community regards Morgellons as nothing more than delusional parasitosis. In other words, these people are crazy. But some health professionals aren't so sure this is a psychiatric condition, and are convinced that further research will reveal evidence to prove so. Researchers who have looked closely at the skin of Morgellons sufferers have admitted the discovery of thousands of tiny hairs which are not of human origin, nor are they from any known animal, plant, or man-made fiber. Further tests on patients from the California Bay Area found that these fibers were actually tiny tubes of protein, but where they came from remains a mystery. A fiber analysis conducted by the Tulsa Police Department's forensic lab in Oklahoma found that Morgellons particles didn't match anything in their database of 800 fibers, or 85,000 organic compounds. And when they heated the fibers to 600 degrees, they didn't even burn. There are currently over 2,000 people in the US who claim to have Morgellons disease and thousands more worldwide. Morgellons came into the public's consciousness when in 2006, Senators Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John McCain joined other representatives in demanding an inquiry by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC concluded that Morgellons was entirely psychiatric, and in 2012, a peer-reviewed medical journal found that half of those with Morgellons tested positive for prescription or illegal drugs, including amphetamines, barbiturates, and cannabinoids, and no parasites of any form were detected during this trial. So what gives? Could people really be imagining this? And if so, what is causing thousands of people around the world to suffer the same hallucinations? Some have claimed that the disease could simply be a previously undiscovered variant of Lyme disease, scabies, or dermatitis, whereas others believe something toxic in our modern environment is the cause. When fiberglass use first became widespread, people reported similar itching in the presence of strange fibers in the skin, and only through microscopic analysis was fiberglass discovered to be the source. So is there a different kind of material in our everyday households which is causing this? Or is this simply a form of OCD which we've not yet categorized? We just don't know. But the most mysterious claim comes from a doctor in New Mexico. Dr. George Schwartz of Santa Fe claims that a former CIA agent told him this was a man-made disease, a botched experiment which contaminated the world's water supply. He says Morgellons originated in France, and that this means all Evian drinkers are at risk. I could have told you that about Evian drinkers. You're paying $2 for something you can get for free from the faucet, and the brand name spells naive backwards. What more evidence do you need? The Kuru Laughing Death. For any comedian or awesome YouTube host with a sprinkling of comedy in their content, the best compliment you can give is to say, "Oh man, your routine absolutely killed it tonight." Shine my shirt. But if your audience starts physically laughing themselves to death, then it may not be your jokes that are causing it. Kuru Laughing Death first came to the attention of the international medical community in the 1950s, when members of the Fore tribe, native to Papua New Guinea, began displaying some mysterious and crazy symptoms. At first, they suffered from unsteady gait, which basically means they were really clumsy. But their symptoms began to progressively get worse, with decreased muscle control and tremors leading to slurred speech and the inability to walk. However, it is the latter stages of the Kuru Laughing Death disease which were the most shocking and give it its name. Within 1 to 3 months of infection, patients would be unable to sit down without help and become completely incontinent. Their moods would rapidly switch from severe depression to periods of insanely maniacal laughter, and they would have no idea where they were, or even who they were. These people would then linger on for anything between a few months or as long as 2 years with these symptoms, constantly bursting into laughter or tears, crapping themselves, and being unable to move or talk. See, this is about the point where I'd make a joke about some of my tequila party nights, but this disease is way too tragic to make fun of, even though I kind of somewhat did. Next line. Thank you. So, could this disease break out from Papua New Guinea? How could the world cope if huge numbers of people just collapsed while laughing in a pile of their own filth? Thankfully, the Laughing Death disease, also known as Kuru, no longer seems to pose a threat to humanity after clinicians traced its root cause. Post-mortem studies on the dead revealed the cause of death to be huge holes formed in the patient's brain, a symptom which scientists have decided to call Swiss cheesing. What a deliciously cute name for something so nasty. This revelation led to the conclusion that the Laughing Death disease was actually related to spongiform encephalopathy. It's caused by a prion found in humans. This in turn helped scientists discover how and why the Fore tribe were acquiring the disease. You see, they were eating the corpses of their dead family members. Apparently, it was a village custom, and when they told the Fore to quit doing this, the laughing disease was mostly eradicated. But the last known sufferer actually died in 2005. So it seems someone was enjoying munching down on mama a little bit too much to quit, even if it meant laughing and crapping themselves to death. At number 3, the Sudanese nodding syndrome. When someone serves me up a giant plate of wings or a juicy steak, you better believe I start nodding my head, spazzing out a little, and screaming, yes, please. I may also drool a little, rip my shirt off, and just dive right on in. But maybe I should be worried, because some of these behaviors are symptoms of the Sudanese nodding syndrome. Nodding syndrome was first identified in Sudan in the 1960s, and tragically, it only seems to affect children. The disease causes mental and physical handicaps in humans, but gets its name from one of the most recognizable symptoms, whereby victims will constantly nod their head back and forth in a strangely rhythmic seizure whenever they are presented with food. Astonishingly, these seizures never occur if the child is presented with a kind of food it doesn't recognize, only if it's something they've eaten before. Nobody knows what is causing this horrible affliction, but MRI scans of the affected children have revealed significant atrophy of the brain and damage to the neuroglia and hippocampus. These areas of the brain are responsible for many different functions, but some of their main jobs include destroying pathogens and holding memories. So, perhaps the brain responds to food with violent seizure because it knows that this is the source of the pathogens which caused nodding syndrome. It's a complete wild stab in the dark, admittedly, because my neuroscience degree is yet to arrive through the mail, but you gotta admit it kinda makes sense, huh? Those with actual qualifications have investigated possible causes for nodding disease, and so far no concrete conclusions have been made. Some blame a parasitic worm carried by the black fly, whereas others believe monkey meat or even wartime chemical exposure could be the primary source. But the most shocking potential cause, which is currently under investigation, is that children who are desperately hungry have been eating the seeds provided by relief charities who operate in the area. These seeds are often covered with dangerously toxic pesticides, but so far, no conclusive proof links them or anything else to the mysterious outbreak of the nodding disease. Number 2, Gulf War Syndrome. Now, the pedants among you will obviously be dying to point out that a syndrome isn't the same as a disease, because a syndrome is merely a collection of symptoms that can happen at the same time, whereas a disease is a health condition whose symptoms all have the same root cause. But since nobody can accurately pinpoint exactly what causes Gulf War Syndrome, there is still the possibility it could be a disease. So there. There were nearly 700,000 U.S. military personnel who served in the 1991 Gulf War, and around 250,000 of these have suffered from a range of symptoms which we now classify as Gulf War Syndrome. Our veterans have been forced to endure physical symptoms including fatigue, rashes, and diarrhea, all the way through to mental difficulties such as brain fog and other cognitive difficulties. These symptoms are still presenting themselves nearly 20 years after the conflict ended, and no campaign before or since has given soldiers such strange and unexplained post-war medical conditions. So what caused it? And who was to blame? Because there's a hell of a lot of dedicated servicemen and women who dearly like to kick someone's ass on this. Unfortunately, this isn't an easy question, as the condition varies between veterans and has affected both soldiers on the front line and support personnel without combat exposure. Other militaries with significant amounts of Gulf War Syndrome sufferers include those from the UK, Canada, and Australia, and there seems to be no common link between them which would allow us to pinpoint a cause. Many theories have been presented, including exposure to depleted uranium, sarin gas, high-powered microwave radiation, and smoke from burning oil wells. There are also some who believe military vaccines or post-traumatic stress are to blame, with insects and pesticides also put forward as other potential causes for the syndrome. So which is the most likely? Well, it is known fact that the Iraqi army used significant amounts of chemical weaponry during the first Gulf War, because if there's one thing that Saddam Hussein loved more than boning Satan, it's chemical warfare. But Allied soldiers may have actually suffered more from their own actions than those of the Iraqis. When the coalition forces destroyed an Iraqi munitions depot in Kamasaya, huge amounts of chemical agent was released into the air, directly affecting 125,000 US troops and 9,000 soldiers from the UK. Obviously, this action was someone's direct order, and whomever it was would stand to lose a hell of a lot if they were unmasked. Equally, if Gulf War Syndrome was caused by exposure to pesticides or vaccines, the insurance costs would be astronomical, and the top brass of major world militaries would be revealed as being complicit in allowing soldiers to come to unnecessary harm. So we can understand why someone might cover up the true source of Gulf War Syndrome to save their own asses, but what if there's a more sinister game going on here? There are many rumors swirling around the first Gulf War, including strange craft attacking US warships, secret US chemical operations called the Black Cat and the Black Dog, and also a bizarre tale of attempted mind control. When the US Marines assaulted and captured an Iraqi transmitter, they reportedly used it to try out technology called Silent Sound Spread Spectrum. This was a communication system which was silent to humans, but used extremely low or high frequencies to induce strange behaviors in those it reached. Was this system successful? Is this what caused Gulf War Syndrome? Sadly, as with all things involving the military, it's doubtful we'll ever be allowed to know. And at number 1, the horde of angry, sleepy sex zombies. Yeah, I know, that headline is pure clickbait right there. But if you stick with me and listen to the story of encephalitis lethargia, you'll be forced to agree it's pretty damn accurate. Encephalitis lethargia is where the brain becomes acutely inflamed in a certain way which causes the patient to become sleepy, a little too sleepy, as if they are frozen in time. sleepy. Sufferers often lie there completely still with their mouths open, their eyes staring right through you, doing nothing whatsoever for days on end. Sometimes they'll sit up but remain motionless without response to stimulation, almost as if these people were trapped in some realm between life and death, until they wake up and start trying to molest you whilst pulling their own faces off. Yeah, many patients who recovered from the disease known as sleeping sickness displayed horrific behavioral problems afterwards, including a propensity to engage in severe bouts of aggression and sexual violence. Another weird symptom was that these people suddenly became unable to enjoy music, literature, poetry, or any other form of art. They became completely oblivious to the entire idea of feeling or enjoying anything. And if you can't figure out which celebrity I'm about to rag on, then you've not watched enough Strange Mysteries videos. Emotionless husk of a human. I think we're talking about you, Keanu. Hey, maybe that's also why I sometimes get downvotes on YouTube. If you've ever given my videos a thumbs down or left me a nasty comment, you need to get yourself checked for sleeping sickness. I'm only looking out for your health, guys and girls. I mean, if you can't appreciate great artists like me, then clearly there's something wrong with your brain. Damn, I'm actually beginning to sound a lot like Kane. But seriously, I hope none of you are secret sleepy sex zombies. It isn't as fun as it sounds. So what became of encephalitis lethargia? Well, it disappeared as quickly as it began. An initial epidemic of over 5 million people were affected between 1917 and 1926, with a third of them dying and the majority being forever mentally challenged. There are no known effective treatments for the disease, and it seemingly takes a progressive and incurable route, similar to Parkinson's disease. Some new cases have occasionally appeared in the 90 years since the initial epidemic began, but due to its complex symptoms and relative rarity, the disease often goes undiagnosed. However, historical psychologists have made a very convincing case for encephalitis lethargia being the root cause of personality shifts in some of our most prominent historical figures. Want to know who their number one suspect is? Of course you do. Having identified symptoms of encephalitis lethargia from documentation that covers his childhood, it is speculated that the most notable sufferer of the angry, sleepy sex zombie disease is this guy.